So my name is Fernando Rodriguez. I'm the Vice President of Connectivity Testing at DEKRA. Let's see. Today I'm going to talk about two United Nations regulations that have to do with cybersecurity in the automotive industry. So let me share your slides. Okay, I hope you can see my slides. Again, this is an introduction to UNECE Work Package 29, which, as I will explain in a little bit, are two new United Nations regulations about cybersecurity and software update in vehicles. As you may have heard during the last 2 days with the keynotes and panels from some of the colleagues in the industry, the automotive industry is undergoing a profound transformation with the increased autonomy, electrification, as well as connectivity in the vehicles. But with the addition of connectivity, we're also adding the exposure to new vulnerabilities and threats. So the cyber criminals are able to find these connectivity weak points in order to penetrate the vehicles, and that creates a certain threat to the vehicle safety as well as the consumer privacy. In order to tackle that really difficult situation that could impede the progress of this great technology that we're all together working on, the United Nations has issued two regulations that are the first ever internationally harmonized binding norms. These are going to take force. They will enter into force in January 2021 and will apply to passenger cars, vans, trucks, and buses. So these two new UN regulations have to do with cybersecurity management system and software update management system. They were adopted on June 25th, so very recently, only 3 months ago, by UNECE, World Forum for Harmonization of Vehicle Regulations. So this is actually the UNECE Work Package 29. Actually, let me explain for those that are not familiar with UNECE. UNECE is the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. It was set up in 1947 and is one of the 5 regional commissions of United Nations. And within UNECE, there's the WP29, which is the World Forum for Harmonization of Vehicle Regulations, which is a unique worldwide regulatory forum for the automotive industry. And it administers 3 multilateral United Nations agreements. The first of those agreements is the 1958 agreement, which regulated type approvals regulations with mutual recognition for vehicles. And we will explain that in a little bit in more detail, because definitely that was the very first time that there was a harmonized standard required by a number of countries, in a way that if a vehicle got homologated for one country, it automatically got approved for other countries. So what UNECE is doing now is updating those regulations that till now have to do with emissions, mechanics, and so on. They're updating it with cybersecurity and software update regulations. So how about when and where are these going to be adopted? So this is going to differ based on the countries. Here we have 3 different regions. First, we can start with Japan. Japan is actually the more advanced in this area. They have already adopted the regulations in its draft form, and it's already the land of the law. And they are going to be replacing it progressively with the latest releases of the regulations. So they are quite ahead in the game here. The Republic of Korea, they are doing it in a two-stage approach. First, they are introducing provisions for the regulation as a guideline, and it's going to be released sometime in Q4, and then they will proceed with the regulation on a second step. The European Union has also come up with a two-step approach. On the first hand, by July 2022, all new vehicle types that are going to be receiving type approval need to be conforming to these specifications. However, vehicles for existing types are exempt from that regulation. However, that will change again in July 2024. From that moment on, all vehicles that classify for this regulation, regardless whether they are new or existing types, will have to be conforming to these new regulations. When we put all these three, the two countries and one region together, we're talking about over 1/3 of the vehicle productions that are going to be subject and compliant with these new regulations in the next years. Not only that, but also many other countries are following these regulations as well, although they are adopting their own. So we will talk about this more specifically in the next slide. Here you can see a map of the UNECE countries that signed the 1958 agreement. With the 1958 agreement, basically, as soon as a vehicle got homologated and got approval from the technical service and the country approval of that country, then they got automatically approval for all the other countries that signed this agreement. And as you can see, they cover a big part of the world. So you see most of Europe here. Regards to Asia, also quite a big chunk. You have Russia, Turkey, Uzbekistan, Pakistan, Thailand, Korea, and Japan. We have also Australia and New Zealand that were signatories. And then in Africa, only 4 countries. We have Tunisia, Egypt, Nigeria, and South Africa. However, all those countries that are in gray that did not sign the agreement doesn't mean that they are ignoring the agreement. Most of them are still using this as the baseline. For example, the United States also use this regulation in order to adopt their own country's regulation. So that means if the vehicle has been approved according to UNECE, a lot or most of the requirements for other countries will already be met as well. So something important also to highlight, this does not apply to all vehicles. It applies to vehicles that have a level of driving automation which are 3 or upwards. So that means all vehicles where the automated system monitors the driving environment. So level 3, 4, and 5. Let's talk first about the first part of the regulations. We have 2 parts to this regulation. The very first one has to do with cybersecurity and cybersecurity management systems. So this regulation is going to put processes that identify and manage risks in the vehicle design at the very early stage. That is even before production. Just they want to make sure that during the design process, the cybersecurity risks are already designed in. And then they need to verify also that the risks are managed, and there needs to be testing to be able to ensure that the risks are managed properly. Then it needs to make sure that the risk assessments are kept current. Very important aspect, monitor cyber attacks and respond to them effectively. They need to support also the analysis of successful and attempted attacks, and it needs to assess the cybersecurity measures that they remain, let's say, up to date with new vulnerabilities. So all of that is going to be audited by the technical services or country authorities. And here we're going to talk a little bit more about how that process works. What kind of evidence do you need to show? So again, this is an audit. It's part of this 1958 agreement. So the technical service is going to make sure that they go through all the different aspects that have been defined in this regulation. And there needs to be evidence, written evidence of all these items. So there's very important aspects in here. For example, there needs to be a cybersecurity management system put in place in the organization. This is not something trivial. This is for those that are familiar with quality management systems, how they affect is not just a bunch of documents that explain processes. They are actually impregnated integrated in all the processes of the organization, and they change the way the organization thinks and the organization works. So that cybersecurity management system that needs to be put in place, it needs to be a certified one. That's also a very important one. It has to be certified. And it has to be put in place for vehicles that are existing on the road. So it's very important also that there be a risk analysis, and that risk analysis needs to identify the critical elements. For example, critical elements could be related to the telematics units in its connectivity, or the OBUs related to cellular connectivity or DSRC. So all this connectivity entry points are going to be major areas where there can be risk and can be subject to penetration attacks. So there needs to be evidence through a lot of testing. The testing can be done by the OEM themselves, or they can engage a third party that's going to help them come up with a risk analysis, identify also the critical points, and definitely come up with a test plan that's specific to the design, so that they can also provide the evidence and test reports that will be needed for the type approval. So a very important aspect also among all these points is the monitoring activities. This is also going to be something quite critical. This is an effort that does not exist nowadays to that effect. If we think about home security, or we think about the IT industry that is being used to dealing with cyber attacks since almost its inception. So we know how much money is devoted to this, how many companies are just working on delivering services regarding just to monitoring threats and dealing with them, right? So all that industry will be expanding also to the automotive industry, or there will be newcomers that will be specialized just for automotive, so that they can serve also the OEMs, which are responsible for this according to the new regulations. So this is a huge business opportunity also for many organizations. So once all of this has been performed and the evidence compiled, it will be submitted to homologation authority or an appointed technical service that will be approving the type, the vehicle type. Okay, so here we're going to talk about the second part of the UN regulations. The first part have to do with the cybersecurity attacks. The second part has to do with how do you deal with those attacks. We talked about doing this risk analysis, looking at the vulnerabilities, monitoring them, making sure that they are managed and handled. So how do you handle that afterwards? So there's likely going to be a lot of more software updates that will need to be put in the vehicles. That will be software security patches, or basically software updates or upgrades that have to do with increased security. So because of that, there needs to be also a regulation that is going to ensure that the integrity of the software update process. This part of the regulation also applies to passenger cars, vans, trucks, buses, trailers, and agricultural vehicles. These are the different aspects that the software update management system regulation is going to look into. Okay, so it's going to be very important also that there's record of the hardware and software versions that are linked to the type approval. So we're not anymore approving just a vehicle, a type that has to do with a bunch of combinations of mechanics. We're talking here about almost like on a mobile phone or a computer, right? So you have a hardware version and a software version. If you change the software to that component, so it's a different, let's say it's already a different system. It can behave totally different. So the homologation belongs to both, to the combination of hardware and software versions. And there needs to be clear monitoring and identification of those combinations. Then it needs to be very clear which are the software versions that have been homologated, and it has to be the owner and the inspector need to be able to identify it as well in the vehicle. Of course, also the owner needs to be informed about any updates that are happening. And we're going to talk about how evidence towards all these points in here is going to be gathered. So according to the 1958 agreement as well, so the type approval is going to be a very thorough process, everything in writing, so that it can be, let's say, recognized by all the other countries. So it's very important that also that there's a software update management system put in place in the organization that is going to organize how this whole software update process is going to work. This SAMS, as it's called, needs to be certified and it needs to be available to vehicles on the road. There needs to be a mechanism to ensure that the software update mechanism is it's secure. There's integrity and authenticity, especially because many of them, as I said, will be security patches, right? So this could be done through cables, but most likely this will be happening through over-the-air software updates. So the over-the-air mechanism, it's very well contemplated and regulated in this United Nations regulation because it's very critical. So there's several aspects that need to be taken into account. For example, there needs to be the mechanism to restore to a prior version in case the new version fails. Or the new version should only start when it's safe, if the car is able or the vehicle is able to complete it, if it's safe to do it. For example, not doing while it's in movement for some critical aspects, and ensure that, that the user is informed as well. What are the challenges of OEMs and suppliers? So first of all, compliance versus non-compliance. I've said this already several times. The best advantage of compliance is if the product type is approved by one country, you get it approved by all the other 53 countries. Plus, you get most of the regulations passed already or compliance met for many of the remaining countries, although you still need to go through the paperwork and additional testing. Non-compliance definitely would put the vehicle maybe rejected in many countries and may put also at risk of having some recalls because the vehicle will not be compliant. So some of the potential challenges of the new regulations. We have here two different types of challenges. On the first part, we have challenges to the process itself, and the second one are technical challenges that come with it. In regards to the process itself, okay, I explained how these regulations require that cybersecurity management system be in place and a software update management system be in place. Well, this is not peanuts. This is a huge effort for the automotive manufacturers. It's going to affect the whole supply chain from the way they do the procurement right now to the way they do the pre-production, production, and even post-production afterwards. And this needs to be audited. And to do all of that in a cost-effective way is going to be not negligible. And managing the transition also for vehicles that are already under development, that's also very tricky. And ensuring that all the audits are more or less harmonized in a way that are consistent. That's also, for the industry, something that needs to be tackled. In regards to technical challenges, it's very important also the identification of, actually first the monitoring of the cyber attacks, the detection and response, but the continuous monitoring is going to be a very huge challenge for the industry. There needs to be a lot of investment put into that. Also, the assessment of critical elements, identify which ones are the most critical elements in every design. That will probably be one of the most critical aspects of the success of the efforts. And definitely improving testing capabilities. The testing capabilities right now are not up to par with the challenge. So there needs to be a lot of effort done by the automotive industry to develop new ways of testing these new methods for cyber attacks. And this can be done not only by the automotive manufacturers, but also they can engage other companies like ours, like DEKRA, that works on testing, and maybe some other companies that are devoted only to cyber testing that may also come up. So in regards to the requirements, whose requirements are those? Who's responsible for them? So first of all, it's very important to emphasize the requirements here from the United Nations regulation are for the OEM. The responsible is the vehicle manufacturer, nobody else. It's the vehicle manufacturer. However, as the vehicle manufacturer sets up their own cybersecurity and software update management systems, they're going to increase requirements for vendors. So indirectly, they will pass on some of those requirements down, cascading down the supply chain. So the tier ones and tier twos and so on will end up seeing also some of those cybersecurity requirements come up indirectly, right, through the OEMs. It's very important also to emphasize the testing of critical components. So some of these component manufacturers will end up with the burden of having to test them. But again, that does not alleviate the OEM from having to test the whole product, because in the end, you can test the component, but once you integrate it into the vehicle, you can create new vulnerabilities during the integration process. So the overall vehicle is the one that needs to be type approved, and the burden is on the OEM. Steps to compliance. So here, this is our own approach, DEKRA's view on how compliance to these new regulations can be established and can be followed. So first of all, there needs to be awareness and competence on cybersecurity in the automotive manufacturers. So this is a mentality change. And that means there needs to be investment, there needs to be new teams set up, there needs to be a completely new way of how the automotive manufacturers have been working until now. And this is this transformation, although it may seem not too difficult, it actually is. It's a change of mindset for new organizations. That's not simple. Then there needs to be an early gap analysis done for every design, and a cybersecurity process development needs to be established. And last but not least, there needs to be an audit for the cybersecurity management system. So this can be done by the automotive manufacturers by themselves, or they can engage an external organization like DEKRA that would help handhold them through the whole process. And just to finalize, I'm just going to mention that our organization, DEKRA, offers consulting and training services related to all these steps that we have just explained. We also provide product testing services, either for specific components or for the entire vehicle system. We provide also audit and certification services. These can be internal audits that are performed by a third party. I'm not talking about the final audit. However, a different team within DEKRA is also a technical service recognized by the country authorities. We actually have teams in Germany, Italy, and Czech Republic that are already recognized as technical services. I'm talking about technical services up to now for automotive homologation. So based on emissions and all the mechanics and basically all the regulations that have been in place for many years until now. But they are also now working to become recognized for the new scopes that have to do with the cybersecurity and software update regulations of UNECE Work Package 29. So since we're just out of time, so we're finishing up here. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. You can see here my email address or even my phone number if you prefer to call. We will be happy to help you with any questions related to these United Nations and UNECE regulations, any questions regarding cybersecurity, or any question regarding connected and automated driving. So thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present here. And I wish you a very good day. I would like to ask you not to leave because now there's going to be a panel with several cybersecurity experts that are going to be talking about several aspects of how it affects our industry. And you're going to see there Jorge Wallace, who is the cybersecurity lab manager at DEKRA, as well as other industry colleagues. So please stay and enjoy the rest of the event. Thank you very much.